Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Miss Lucas. We're going to be talking about logic in our next unit. What we have here is day one, and we're going to be talking about conditional statements. Let's see if I can get this to right this morning. So the phrase conditional statements probably sounds kind of complicated. So let's do some writing. Let's see if my pen does not like to work in that view. So sorry about that. Let me just get it started here. A conditional statement. Go ahead and fill yours in while I'm filling mine in. Is a statement that can be written in if then form. So an example would be right here: if the calculator is yellow, then the board is white. Now, I realize that makes no sense at all. I mean, you understand that some of the calculators in the room are yellow and my dry erase board is white, but that doesn't really make much sense. So I get that. So let me show you another example that makes more sense. You can do well in class if you do your work. Now, I don't actually see an if and a then written out nicely like I did here and here in the previous sentence. But what I do see is this: I see the word if. And what that tells me is that we have a condition. Okay. And what that means is something has to happen before something else can happen. So in this case, if you do your work, then you can do well in class. So let's write that one. Go ahead and write yours in your packet. Sorry, kind of messy. There we go. So now you see, and I'm going to grab a different color. You have the if you do your work, that's your condition. Then this outcome can happen, but you have to do this first. So, I can think of all kinds of instances growing up where my mother made conditional statements to me, like, if you clean your room, then you can go out. Or if you eat your vegetables, then you can have a cookie. But all of those things represented something I had to do before I would get something. Not all if then statements are that way. I mean, you could be talking about the weather. If it is cloudy outside, then it might rain. So the clouds were something that we would expect to see if it was going to rain. Typically, I mean, we can see rain when it's sunny, but it's not the norm. So just some various examples. So that's sort of what a conditional statement is. Now let's break it down. A conditional statement has what we call, I'm writing in red. Sorry about that. A hypothesis. And if you've taken science classes, you might have heard about this word hypothesis. Okay, and the hypothesis in a conditional statement is the part of the conditional statement that follows the word if. It's your condition. And the conditional statement also has a conclusion, which is part of the statement that follows then. So it kind of makes sense that the conclusion That's usually like the word conclude, that comes at the end. Like think about a movie. The conclusion of the movie is the end of the movie. The conclusion of the school day is the end of the school day. 3:30 in the afternoon, bell rings, off you go. So we can use those words in other situations, but this is just what math people decided to call the two pieces in an if-then statement. So let's take a look at an example. If the calculator is yellow, then the board is white. So our notes are asking us to do something here. So take your pencil. We want to underline the hypothesis. And remember, the hypothesis is the part of the conditional statement that follows the if. So let's go find the if. And let's look for the stuff after the if and underline it. So the calculator is yellow is the hypothesis. Then it's asking us to circle the conclusion. Well, the conclusion is at the end. It's the part of the statement that follows then. So let's find the word then and circle the stuff after it. That's your conclusion. Now, you might be wondering why I'm doing this. Well, we're going to need to be able to do things with the hypothesis and the conclusion. We're going to move them around. We're going to change the meaning. We're going to be doing some things, and it's going to feel like more of an English exercise, like English class exercise, than a math exercise. So I figured I better warn you. Okay, let's try another one. If you do your work, then you can do well in class. So underline the hypothesis. That is the piece that comes after the if. So find your if, underline your hypothesis, and then circle your conclusion. That's the part that comes after the then. So there's your conclusion. Okay? Everybody hopefully feeling confident about that. And you can see that sometimes, I'm just going to roll back up here. Sometimes you have a conditional statement, but it's not exactly in if-then form, but you can fix it, so that it follows that if something, something, then something, something. Sometimes you have to rewrite them in if-then form before you can do, hey, what's the hypothesis? And hey, what's the conclusion? Okay. Now, next skill. Let's say I told you it is really cold outside and you disagreed with me. Like you were like, Miss Lucas, you are just silly. Why would you say in August that it is really cold outside? It is not really cold outside. So in disagreeing with me, which is fine, you have changed the meaning of my statement. And the word that we added was not. Now, sometimes you might add the word don't. So let me give you another example. How about I like French fries? Well, if I wanted to change the meaning of that, I could say I don't like French fries. So I'm going to put over here, don't, like, or can't. There's a lot of different words. But basically, by inserting or removing that word, you're going to change the meaning of a sentence or a statement. So let's take a look at this one. Part of our example from above said, the calculator is yellow. Okay, so let's put the word not in there. Okay, let's write that down here. The calculator. Okay, I was having trouble spelling. Is not yellow. So maybe it's white, or maybe it's black, or maybe it's blue or green, something else, gray. So what happened to the meaning? Well, this meaning here completely changed this meaning here just by putting in that one little word. And this has a special math word. We call this negate or negation. Okay, so there's that. And by putting the word not in, we are changing the meaning, changing it from yes, it is to no, it's not, or from no, it's not to yes, it is. And that's just a nice little math word. I actually like that math word because the fact that it sounds like a negative, remember how, like, if we have a positive, we can undo it by subtracting. If we have a plus, we do the opposite, and that's a minus. So I think we already have some background knowledge to help us with that. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. All right. We're going to practice that again, so don't worry if it's a little shaky right now. So let's take a moment, turn the page to page 2. Okay, now what we're going to do is going to get a little bit nutty. So let's read here. If we swap the hypothesis and the conclusion, so we're not changing the if and the then. We're just changing the hypothesis and the conclusion. The stuff after the if, the stuff after the then, and we're going to swap it. This is still a conditional statement, but it has a special name. It's called a converse. And I always think of the sneakers. You guys ever seen the Converse, the Chucks, where you can get them in you can swap them out, you can get them in many different colors. I always think of that when I think about Converse. So if we take the example that we did a few minutes ago on page 1, where we underlined the hypothesis and we circled the conclusion, let's do the swap. Let's go ahead and swap that. So this hypothesis is going to come at the end, and this conclusion is going to become at the beginning. So watch what it looks like. We're still going to have if, but now we're going to bring the conclusion into the hypothesis. Then, so now we take the hypothesis and make that the conclusion. I'm going to write down here. Now I realize that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. However, that is the converse. We have taken the original conclusion, made it the hypothesis. We have taken the original hypothesis and made it the conclusion. That's a converse. We as a class just wrote a converse of a conditional statement. Now, here's another type of conditional statement. If we negate the hypothesis and the conclusion, this is also still a conditional statement, but it's called the inverse. Now, notice it doesn't say swap anywhere. So are we going to move anything? The answer to that is no. We are not going to move anything. But what we're going to do is remember what negate meant. Let me go back here to page 1 real quick. Remember, negate means we did something with the word not, or don't, or can't, or something along those lines. So let's go back and negate each piece. I just have to scroll. Give me one moment. There we go. So here's our original. Notice this is our original conditional statement. This is not the converse. We always go back to the original conditional statement. when we're writing these. So we're going to negate the hypothesis. So we actually already did that once. We took the calculator is yellow and we made it the calculator is not yellow. Then the board is white. Well, how do we make that say the opposite meaning or change the meaning completely? We would say the board is not white. And see how we put the word not in the hypothesis and we put the word not in the conclusion. So that is called the inverse of the original conditional statement. All right, ready for the next one? If we do both, we swap, excuse me, and negate. We're doing both. We're not just doing the converse. We're not just doing the inverse. We are doing both. This is also still a conditional statement, but it's called, and I don't know if you've heard of this before, the contrapositive. So we're going to write the contrapositive. So we're going to swap the hypothesis and the conclusion, and I should have this in here, and negate it. Kind of a little typo there. Maybe you want to add that to your notes. So we're going to take if. Now we're going to swap it. So we're going to bring this piece first. The board. Now we want to negate it also. Is not white. There's our then. Remember, we're going to swap it. So the hypothesis is going to come to the end. The calculator. But remember, we also have to negate it. Is not yellow. And that's really hard for a lot of people. So if that seems really confusing, please don't freak out because we are going to do some more. I promise. Okay, last one. Last little bit of vocabulary today. Now, if you change the conditional statement from if then and write it instead with if and only if, this is called a biconditional. And let me show you what a biconditional looks like. We take the hypothesis, we take the conclusion, and we get rid of if and then. So we're going to keep this piece. We're going to keep this piece. So let's write this. The calculator is yellow. And we take that statement, if and only if, and we put it in the middle like a connector. If and only if, and then we put our conclusion. The board is white. And that is a biconditional statement. It is not a conditional statement. It's a biconditional, and they're a little bit different. Pardon me. So what we're going to do is we're going to end this video And if you look at the rest of page 3, sorry, my phone's ringing, there's a practice for you. So what I'd like you guys to do, there's problem 1, problem 2. You can practice those and then come back and watch the next video.